Okay, we call this meeting of the Advisory Water Committee for the Town of Paonia to order. It's Wednesday, July 21st at 5:07 p.m. Ooh, first thing we'll do is roll call. I see I put agenda before roll call, but Thomas Markle,
That's me.
Mike Drake,
Here.
and Philip Siriani is away for the evening. And for staff, we have Corinne Ferguson, Administrator Corinne Ferguson, and Public Works Director Travis Loberg. All right. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda, or do I hear a motion to approve as written? So the first one is to clarify our list of priorities related to the JDS Hydro Water Study. The second one is water plant operation procedures to include review of the 29 water incident after action report, which if you haven't all received, okay. And the third is the master SCADA plan, and Philip was going to lead that discussion, but I think we can discuss it. He did send in some comments on that. And that would be it. Is that okay?
No,
Are you motioning?
no, I would like to add an item for preliminary discussions. And that is, we're getting all these things together. Do we have a roadmap or a plan on how we're going to bring this information to the trustees?
No, we really don't. So that might be a good discussion. So preliminary discussion of how to present the number one on the agenda, clarifying the list of priorities related to the JDS Hydro Water Study.
And anything else we come up with. Yeah.
Say that last part again, I'm sorry.
I would say anything else that we come up with as we're talking through things.
Okay, got it. So a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of a preliminary discussion of how to present our points related to our priorities related to the JDS water study.
I make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Sure, let's do that. Second.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So I guess we'll just dive right in, clarify our list of priorities. So when it came to presenting them to the board, I was completely unprepared and didn't have what everybody else thought were the priorities. So would anybody like to, so what I received since the last meeting was the 5 points being additional staffing, which will be begin to be addressed in the 2022 budget, PRV improvements, basically as approved or as recommended by JDS, raw water data collection, broken spring line repairs, and water loss analysis. Does that sound right to anybody, or does anybody have anything to add or change?
That sounds right to me based on our last meeting.
Any comments, Mike?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm going to say I think that sounds right.
So maybe we could even start this, adding the preliminary discussion of how to present these to the board just by, maybe I could just add that the way I understand it is the additional staffing would be to have somebody working with Travis at the water plant or working on the system. Someone who could be there if he's gone, a backup person, maybe even just it's got to be, as far as I know, I don't know, a certified water operator. I guess that's something we need to talk about. And then the PRV improvements, they're pretty much laid out in JDS Hydro, including the cost. And I don't know if we know exactly which vaults need improvement. The raw water data collection would start with possible recommendation from Browns Hill on how to like create a plan for installing all of the infrastructure at the springs that needs to be installed to be able to measure, to collect that data, to get that data and collect it. And then the broken spring line repair, pretty self-explanatory, and I believe that that is budgeted, money's budgeted for that every year. Is that correct? Okay. And then the water loss analysis would, per Philip Sirianni's suggestions, begin with a master meter calibration. How did I do?
Crushed it.
Okay. Yay.
I guess my only concern is the master meter calibrations. I'm not sure exactly with the type of meters that are installed. There's not really a calibration method. I mean, you can take them out of service and do flow testing on them, but there's not really a calibration to that to those meters.
And the other part to that is, with the exception of one water company, the master meters are actually owned and serviced by the water company.
Okay, so this again was Philip's recommendation. So he would really be the one who would, I would think, unless either Mike or Thomas has any thoughts on that, he would be the one to say, well, this is what he envisions, that that there are meters that need this calibrating. So, yeah.
I guess I have a question. The town has no master meters in places? The town does not have any master meters in place where you're metering what happens in a section of the user area, and then you're using that meter to check to see if things balance?
Yes, we have few, not a lot, but yes, we have a few. And I was under the assumption what we call a master meter is to the water companies themselves.
Yeah, I think definitions gets us wrapped around the axle on a regular basis. Okay, so I think what Philip was talking about was any meter that you're using to check the flow, that meter checks the flow, and then there are directly downstream of that meter different meters that you then need to calculate backwards to see what the difference is between the master meter and the user's meters in essence. And you're right, well, I can't say you're right. You're probably right, but I know with Stewart Mesa Water Company, we have a master meter. Actually, we have a couple of them. And then we back calculate to help find leaks and meter inaccuracies and so forth. But I can honestly say I have no idea if any of those things have calibration procedures. Like Travis was saying, other than pulling it out of line and doing a flow test, but then I don't know how that works anyway.
Well, your ultrasonic meters, there's a calibration sequence for those, but it's your meters that are like turbine meters or compound turbine meters and stuff they're not calibrated, they're flow tested and stuff. And what I call a master meter is like to the water companies, like inline meters would be like I guess is what Phil's thinking about calibrations. I mean, I'm guessing.
He's getting a new battery.
Well, if I recall too, his thought was that perhaps it would be something that would be regularly scheduled, make sure that these meters are all measuring properly every 3, 4, 5 years. So I don't know if that's necessary, or, I mean, he knows a lot more than I do.
It is difficult to know exactly what his thoughts were without him here, of course, but I would think that that would be twofold, whether or not because again, the town doesn't own those meters, so whether the town then would be wanting to take on the cost to do that, or when the town makes the priority to start renegotiating those agreements with water companies, it may be an inclusion in those updated agreements.
I'd like to come back and say that the water company master meters in Corinne and Travis's world is, I'm sure that, I believe Philip isn't talking just about the water company master meters. He's talking about, like I said earlier, anything that gives you a check between point A and point whatever. So we need to clarify that, but I believe it's not as simple as the water company meters. I would just about, if I were a betting man, I'd put big bucks on that's not all Phil's talking about, is that.
And I think too, that is something we can follow up. I don't think we need to give him a call, but any thoughts on that, Travis? You're the one who is in this day to day. And I don't even understand an inline meter versus, maybe you can just explain meters a little bit if you could.
Well, what I would consider a master meter is anything that we're going to bill off of. An inline meter is a check method meter, in my opinion. It's most of the time they're on a dead end line, and it's got several meters below it, but we don't bill off of it.
And does the system have those?
Yes, we have a few, very, very few, but we do have a few.
And again, would those be in the water company lines, or is that something the town actually
No,
has?
we've got they'd be like non-billable meters, like Robinson's master meter, or inline meter. It measures for like a little subdivision that is part of the town's water system, but we don't bill off the master meter, we bill individual meters.
So like Lamborn Schoolhouse, we had that. We had to read the one at the little Lamborn, where the old Lamborn Schoolhouse was. And then we had a meter. But maybe that's a bad example. Maybe there was no master meter at the Lamborn School, so only 2 taps on it.
Right,
So-
that one wasn't like that. Like down here on Fifth Street, there's 4 taps off of that line that run down Fifth Street, but we've got a meter at the head of that one, and we read it, but we don't bill off of it. We bill individual meters. It's just a check, like Mike said, for leak detection.
So do we have, we do have records of readings from those meters? Okay. How long have we had those? Like how far back do they go?
Robinson's master meter goes back at least 15 years. I know.
15?
15.
Okay.
The one on Fifth Street, probably gonna say ever bit that long.
Say as long as I've been working for the town, so all of those meters have been installed.
Okay. And while we're talking about meter overall flows and whatnot, it's come to my attention that we do have a daily log of the totalized meter from the plant. That was discussed with JDS. I don't remember that discussion with Doug. How many records do we have of that? Is it the same deal?
That totalized meter was from the day that plant was turned online.
Right.
I've got a total, but it's not monthly data like JDS was wanting.
Yeah, no, as I understand it, there's daily, like, you write down every day the totalized, right?
Yes. Well, most every day. There's could be a few days that
Sure.
I miss and stuff,
Right.
but
But you got a log of recording
Yes.
that totalized number? Okay.
So then, if we're looking at water loss analysis, the master meter calibration may or may not be a reality, maybe to be determined. What other ways are there to analyze the water loss in the system? I mean, we know we have a pretty significant amount, 35 to 40%, according to JDS. So what would be, where would we go from there then? What would be the best plan? Is this something we need to actually contract out, or is this something that could be done in-house, in your opinion?
in my opinion, I think a water loss analysis should be taken out for contract.
I would agree with that, because those are the 2 people who would have to do it, and they're busy enough as it is.
And following the last meeting, I did reach out to engineer firms to get an idea of what that would look like and what it would cost. I've got back one from JDS so far, who presented a couple different options that could be taken for how to go about a water loss analysis. But I haven't received one back yet from SGM. They're still working on it.
Can we get
Yeah.
that, a response from JDS?
Yeah, if you'd like them as they come in, I can do that.
So do, oh,
Can I make one more comment about? This is me talking. I'm not trying to say this is what Phil's thinking. But we have, it's not really a complicated system, but if you look at the water system, it is it's got tentacles running in all different ways. And like in the water loss analysis, you gotta have some way to measure, like Travis was saying, you've got 1 meter that they don't bill on, but then there's 4 or 5 or more meters below which they do bill on. Well, if you don't have the meter in front, you can't, if you're gonna do a water loss analysis, that's one way you do it, or you go in and set in meters, and then you'd have to literally break the line, put in a meter, and take measurements. But in a complicated system, you always have checkpoints so that you can check that, okay, checkpoint A is looking at 3, 4, and 5, and if you add those up or do whatever you need to do depending on what they're doing, if it mathematically works, hey, it's working. In the case of the water, if we say we've got 1,000 gallons used here, and we look at the 3 and we add them up and it's 900 gallons, then we've lost 100 gallons of water, and it's somewhere between your checkpoint and your 3 other points. So on any complicated system, you have to have checkpoints where you can check and make sure everything's working the way it should. If you have no checkpoints, then you can't find the one chip in the radar system that's blowing the whole thing up. I think that's what Phil was trying to get to.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to speak for anybody who's not present. But this was kind of my initial concern, or my area of concern when we first started getting together, was getting meter reads, getting all these measurements together. And it seems like we're still doing the same, walking in the same circles here 6 months later. So I don't know what needs to change, but feels like not a lot has happened.
So just to clarify, you're wanting reads on individual meters, not by name, or, yeah,
No,
explain.
I don't remember what month it was. I think it was February or March. One of our second or third meetings, where I laid out 5 points of measurement that I was interested in collecting: the spring boxes, the plants, the into the plant, out of the plant, at the point of use, like the use meters, and then the sewer plant intake, as I recall, were the 5 locations. And there was some assent from Travis at that time, but I don't think that I mean, obviously we can't do the spring because there's no way to do it, and the rest of it seems like it's unavailable for various reasons. So I don't know what we're doing here.
I guess don't understand what you're asking for. If you're spring flows, I can get CFS on most spring flows. It's taken monthly through the water commissioner. JDS has that. Plant intake. I've got that. Yeah, it should be on the water spreadsheet. Plant outflow is in there. Sewer plant data, I can get that. What was the fifth one?
The actual use meters.
Use.
Yeah, I mean, that was same. It's what you said before, that it was available and that you get it together by mid-April. But I mean, obviously, I can't make you guys do anything, so, I don't,
As far as the use meters, I can redact the confidential information out of
yeah, well, that's a separate,
the meter reads.
yeah, my core request is.
No, I mean,
separate
specific,
matter.
no, but I'm talking about the use meters. So I can provide that data to the advisory water committee,
It doesn't
of
matter. I'll
course,
make it public whenever I receive it.
redacted, but I need a period of time.
Okay, well, I'm not worried about it. It's a separate issue at this point for those. And if that's how it's gonna have to happen, then I'll go ahead and request the rest of it through Cora. But I just don't, feels like a fight to try and get the information that I'm interested in to try and do the task I've been assigned here. So, I don't know. I don't know what we're doing.
So what you're looking for, is that related to water loss? Is that,
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
were all privy to my email that sent to Mary back in February, whenever, that outlined my intentions with this. And I want to be clear that as far as I understand it, there is no such thing as private information as far as the water system is concerned, billing or use. It might be determined later. But yes, the losses between all those points would help us pinpoint, or at least have a general idea of what we're losing and the overall flow of the system. You know, say, okay, well, we got 30% loss estimated by JDS, and that's just between the plant and the point of use. So if we have 30% loss there, and we have 50% loss from the springs coming into the plant, and we have another, 20% loss elsewhere, we can start to examine those, where those leaks are. With the additional information of the sewer line, we can get a estimate as far as the amount of use that people are using to irrigate, because that is water that is not going to be ending up in the sewer, and there will be also some evapotranspiration losses. My understanding is that it's about 90% generally of the water that's gone into the tap comes out at the sewer line. There's 90% losses inside those lines, sewer leaks and evaporation, but it would still give us a point of a basis to say how much water are we putting in the drain versus how much water are we putting on our yards. And then with a historical record, we could also say, look at the trends in these and say, okay, is our overall use increasing, decreasing? How does it correspond to weather, to billing changes, to changes in drought measures? You know, if we say that we want people to conserve, are they actually doing it? All these are things that I think are important, and I'm interested in solving and finding out, and I haven't gotten any help from town on this front, and I'm so frustrated that we've been given this task and asked to help, and not given the tools and basic information that we need to even begin to look at it. And I feel like JDS was in the same boat with us, and fortunately in the past month, they've started to receive some information, but I'm honestly about just to give up, because I'm not seeing anything happening here.
so this, if what I'm hearing is correct, and thinking back, and if any of this was my fault for dropping things, I apologize. This has been a steep
Not at all.
learning curve. Yeah, don't worry. And just wanted to put that out there. It seems to me like this is like almost the first step, the first logical step in figuring out where we might be losing some water. So the Springboks, JDS has that. Is that, do we have to get that from them, or can that be shared with the advisory committee?
I can pull it off the website. Yeah.
If you could maybe show one of us how to do that, is that possible?
I have access to the information that you're talking about, but that's not ours. Those aren't our springs. I mean, we have 30-some springs out there that we only have measurement of one, correct?
No, there's several of them that are measured. Like, but that, I mean, yeah, we have 32 springs, but a lot of them go into one collection system and are brought down and measured once because they're so close together that that's how they've always measured them. We have German Creek, which is brought over. Maze is that's actually measured through a ultrasonic meter, but most of them are partial flumes.
I appreciate hearing that multiple springs are going into one place, because I kept trying to figure out how is 6 pipes enough for all the springs we're using. I also want to ask my other 2 advisory group people that are here. Thomas is volunteering to do some work if he can get some data. And I don't know if that's even within our... Do we have to get the trustees to say it's okay to work with the data? I wonder, coming up with the idea that we need this fits under what we're supposed to do. Actually doing it, I have a question about. And I'll put money on it, although I know if Thomas did it, it would be done right. The trustees would probably want an outside firm to verify it. And I could be completely wrong. But part of what I think we struggled with this from the beginning. What is it that we are actually supposed to do? And ain't nobody in this room can answer that question right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's valid, because we didn't have a specific set of deliverables or anything like that. So, it's entirely possible that that's not the board's intent, but our task was pretty broad, and the best way that I see that we can begin to answer questions and solve problems is to get a bunch of numbers together and do some math. So, like I said, at this point, it's kind of moot, because I mean, all that information is public record. So, if I'm going to take it upon myself to do this work, I'll just pull public record requests and do it the hard way. I was kind of hoping that we'd have teamwork and assistance, but it's fine.
Well, it seems to me the only thing that may be private, and I don't know for sure, is the names of the individual meter holders.
As I understand it, Colorado Open Records, unless we're a public utility, which we are very distinctly not, there's no right to privacy for bill payers. Kind of like how property records, property taxes, et cetera. You know.
Did you have a question?
I've said from the beginning that I would provide redacted meter readings. There's question as to and a difference of opinion on whether or not the information should be redacted, but all information that I have ever been provided with, trainings that I've received through the continuing education that I've done, and legal opinion is that individual utility bill identifying information, so your name, address, that would identify your utility bill is protected information. So providing meter readings so that you could track it over time with a meter ID number and things like that, I can do that. I've stated that I would do that from the beginning. But that is not the record that is wanted, so I haven't pulled it.
How many times have I asked for that? You, not on our Zoom meeting in March. That was specifically what I asked for. You said redacted. I said fine. Explicitly said that that's acceptable. Like whatever, you know, I've repeatedly said that I'm happy to get whatever you're to provide, and I've gotten nothing.
Well, I believe that I provide a lot of information to the Advisory Water Committee. I apologize if I missed you saying that you were happy with the redacted, because I don't recall that conversation. But if you can give me a period of time that you would like to start with, what would you like? 1 year?
As much as you can provide.
Okay.
What other information do you not have?
Flow data from the plant intake, flow data from plant outlet, meter data that's being used, sewer inlet data. I like springs, but I know that those are not all available.
Can we put in a written request for that information? I mean, what do, we don't need to? Okay.
The in and out data is in the water data spreadsheet, so we'll provide that again, and we'll start pulling the meter data, and Travis will I'll work with him on getting the sewer plant data.
And hopefully that will give us a place to start on the water loss analysis, combined with looking at the estimates from JDS and SGM if it comes in. And I believe if we could move on to the number 3, raw water data collection. I think Philip was pretty clear, and I think that was maybe one of the things I had right when I typed up for the board, is we want to get Browns Hill to go in and just look at the Springs area and come up with some sort of a plan for how to get those partial flumes in, how to get all the infrastructure in, clean up those springs, and then have that collection, start collecting that data. Does that sound correct?
Yes, but I think that's probably going to have to be an RFP that goes out to every engineering company, because there's several companies besides Brown Hills that does controls like that.
The only thing they're talking about is for them to Phil, they're going to give us, these are the kinds of things you have to do. And from that, you build an RFP and send it out to whoever. So they're not getting paid to do what they're going to do. That's my understanding of what Phil said. They're going to say, these are the data that you need that you can put that together. So I don't think, I mean, he took it away from, he tried to turn it so that it wasn't sounding like they were going to get a project to do this. One might argue that they might know a little more, but if everything they tell us is in the RFP, then everybody knows the same amount of information. But that was my understanding from Phil. And I have a request for everybody except for the community that's in the room. Let's start with, today is where we are and this is what we need. I don't need to hear, I gave the data to somebody or I asked for it and didn't get it. We can, you know, if you wanted it yesterday, if you wanted it yesterday, then go back yesterday and get it. You can't do that. So let's quit throwing little barbs at each other, because that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, I think we are moving on from that. That's why I wanted to go to number 3, just because it sort of relates to the water loss analysis. My understanding was he thought that maybe between $1,500 and $2,000 they would come out, take a tour of the site, just do a write-up of, you know, here's how we see the best way forward with this. Again, I'm not trying to speak for Phil, but for Philip, but I believe that was his recommendation.
That was my understanding as well, is that he wanted to have, I forget the fellow's name, his contact over there, Chris Lansky, from Browns Hill, and I was kind of mixed about paying somebody to come up with a spec before we really understood what he was thinking. So I think where we left it was Chris was going to come in and talk to the group here at this meeting or some subsequent meeting.
Yeah, Phil did say he'd get him to come here and talk to us. But we need Phil here for that meeting.
And we would need to hear from them, I think, what they could do and what it would cost. Would that help determine if you need an RFP? I mean, it's my understanding things under a certain dollar amount wouldn't require an RFP.
Under 20,000 doesn't require an RFP. I think then the question is, and I would concur with what Thomas said, is whether or not you would pay one engineering firm to come in and analyze and tell you how they would do it when there's multiple firms that provide the same service, and would it not be a better idea to put out an RFP requesting information on how to, on what we want, and then hear from the individual firms that do this for their profession on how they would address it and what would be the best method and the most cost efficient as well for the town to put into place. That's it. I mean, and again, it may be 6 in one, half dozen in the other, but do you have one engineering firm dictate how you want the other engineering firms to bid how they would do the job?
Typically, the way the Air Force would do something like that is that somehow, some way, they'd come up with a sketch of what it is they want, for lack of a better word, and then they would talk to people and get their ideas, either in a group session or usually it's in individual sessions. And then they take all of that information, so they talk to more than one potential contractor, and then they take it all together and put it in and put it out for an RFP.
Okay, just to make sure we know why we're talking about this, this is what we want to present to the board to say, hey, this is what our priorities are moving forward, and also in helping to spend the grant money that the town now has. So without Philip here, I would like to just stick to the original recommendation I had typed up, that we have Browns Hill check this out, just if they're willing to do that, rather than try and figure out what company should do this and then just let the board decide. I mean, we obviously can't make decisions, so. Does anybody have a problem with that, or do you have a better suggestion?
We might reach out to JDS Hydro and see what information would be most helpful to them for their model, their system model that they developed, and base a sketch, as Mike described, or a rough spec around those needs. And then we can go through the RFP process with various entities to fulfill those needs.
Is that something, Corinne, you would like to do, or do you want Philip to do that? Reach out to JDS and... Okay, all right. Okay, additional staffing to the 2022 budget. So I was confused on this. What I kept hearing was the town could really use an engineer. But it sounded like maybe it's just getting another body in here that is hopefully certified or getting certified. But that is where we already are, is that correct?
We have a staff member who's on staff that is working toward being able to test and get certified. My understanding from the conversation was that, and from the JDS Hydro study, that it would be beneficial for the water portion of town staff to have another certified. The 3 would be great. So having one working towards certifications and bringing on another individual that has some water certifications was the direction, and that's what we're proposing in the 2022 budget, as well as looking at the contract option for an engineer.
We don't have Phil here. Yeah, well, Phil was pretty adamant, is he thinks we need to, one of the 2 new hires needs to be the manager, and well, Travis has heard him say it. He doesn't think Travis would be the manager. That's not my choice. That's what I heard Phil say. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, we need Phil here, and he will tell you. Phil doesn't pull any punches. He tells you what you think, whether you want to hear it or not. So it's 3 people with a manager and...
So this is the first time I've heard 3 people. What I've heard is a plant operator and an engineer.
I think Mike's referring to the one that we already have that's working toward testing as the 3rd. Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion on staffing? Travis, any comments? No? Okay. Okay, the PRV improvements, those are all stated in the study, and I'm pretty sure I got that one right in my write-up too. Thomas, you might, I don't know if you read it, you might be able to comment on that, but I think we all agree that's something we need to get, the town needs to get moving on. Whether it takes somebody to come in and do an estimate or how we do that, I don't know. Travis, do you have any recommendations on how to get those done?
I guess it all depends on how, if we're doing a complete vault rebuild, where we're taking old PRVs out and putting new PRVs in, or if we're just rebuilding PRVs that are installed already.
Well, it seems to me, I haven't read it in a while, but it seems like there's already a pretty well defined way of going about this in the study. And I'm sorry, I don't have what I typed up, but it would just be following what JDS recommends. I would have to go back and, I mean, I can't cite it all. I would have to go back and look at what I wrote, but we're looking at a cost of about $55,000 according to JDS to get that project completely done. That's money we have, and that's a project that's pretty straightforward and already looked at by JDS. So I think that would be our recommendation to the board, is to follow JDS's recommendations. I don't know if I need to type that up a little clearer, or if Thomas, you want to work with me on that, or?
I think that one was pretty straightforward. They have a pretty explicit model, section 6.5 in their study was model results for suggested improvements, and they outline each improvement, installation and use of PRV1, verification and balancing of PRV5 and PRV9, and removal of PRV5, which I guess would make the previous one PRV4, maybe, I don't know. And then the cost outline, I think, was in the recommendations section, was section 9. So, I mean, it seems like it's pretty, I mean, it's not cut and dried and everything's not totally lined out, but the rough shape of that project is pretty well outlined, I think, by JDS there.
Yeah, this seems like the one thing we can actually just get done. I mean, yeah, maybe there's going to be some preliminary work that needs to be done, but
You need to set a schedule, because if you want to get it done fast, you're going to have to hire people in to do it. And I didn't hear anything about a schedule. And here are the things that need to be done, but how quickly do you want them done? You know, if we give Travis 10 years, he can get all the PRVs fixed by himself. And still do all the other stuff that he has. It just might take 10 years because he has. What's the priority going to be, and what timeline do you want to get him in? That's the other thing we haven't talked about. And I don't know that that's our problem to figure out. If it's going to be contracted out, the contractor should have to lay out a schedule, right?
so Travis, I'm going to lean on you again. Any thoughts on, as far as in-house, is this something that could be done in-house? Would you rather not? Is it, I mean, obviously you're short-staffed.
Right at the moment, I would not want to do it in-house.
As far as writing an RFP, would anybody know, do we have what we need to write an RFP for that?
Maybe, yeah. So we might be able to develop one from the JDS outline. That would be something that probably Mike or Philip would be able to do. I don't know.
All right, we'll have to revisit that, but again, I think that is a very high priority. We do not want a hammer. This is something that we have the money for. This is something that is pretty straightforward. So hopefully that is a project that can be done soon.
May I ask Corinne a question? Corinne, do you have like a standard RFP sheet or?
We have a template.
Yeah, template.
mhm.
Yeah, okay. That would be a wonderful thing.
Corinne, could you share that with Mike? Thanks.
So that brings us down to number 4, broken spring line repair. Travis, could you just give us a rundown of what has been done and what will be done, or maybe it's easier just to say what you think needs to be done? I mean, I know there's money budgeted every year for spring line repair. Where are you in that project?
This year we fixed 4 spring lines, repaired those. So far, right now we've got 2 tie-ins off a pole patch spring to do still, and 1 more leak, which is which would be off the Maze transmission line that comes down into town for line repairs. And then we have one box repair to complete.
And that is budgeted, that's in the budget, is that correct? Okay. Well, that is the 5 points. What am I missing? What's not being said here? Thomas.
I was wondering if there was any development from the ARPA. I'm not sure if that's the actual commit, like what, like who's issuing the grant, but there was some question as to whether we'd be able to use those funds for engineering and planning versus actual implementation and like boots on the ground kind of work. And I don't know if there's been any more information like available, because I couldn't find anything. I don't know if anybody else found anything.
And that is, Corinne did send me some information on that, and I did not share that. I will share that. The documents you sent me on the grant. Okay.
And the only other item that was discussed that hasn't, at the last meeting, was the valve vault installation, and that's the portion in Philip's email. He was talking about the redundancy between the 1 million and the 2. I did, following the last meeting, we had the 20,000 budgeted. The board did approve the engineering, which is estimated cost up to $10,000. So we have 10,000 remaining. Following the last meeting, I did reach out to SGM to get an idea of, they could give us a rough estimate of what it will cost to complete that project. And of course, there's always contingencies, but he's estimating $40,000 to $50,000. So we have a deficit of potentially a deficit of $30,000 to $40,000 that we need to make up to be able to get that project completed.
And I'm sorry for not understanding. Is this the one that connects the 2 systems? Okay.
Does that include all the construction, like the total project cost, or is that just engineering?
That's the total project cost.
Construction costs.
So is that something, do you know, Travis, with Corinne walking out the door, is that something that the ARPA funds would cover? Do you know? Or have you talked about that?
As I understand it, yes.
So I think I'm still kind of at a loss if we're talking, as Mike suggested, which is a great suggestion, how to present this. Any thoughts on how to present it? I mean, the way I did it sort of worked, but Thomas, I guess I'd ask you, do you think that system worked? Is there a better system? Travis had also recommended dividing it into, what was it? What were the four? I had those.
Have collection, which would be springs. You'd have treatment, which would be the plants, tanks, and then distribution.
And speaking of tanks, that was another suggestion that this committee did put forward at Philip's urging, is the lining of the tank. He would like to see that done this year. I don't know how realistic that is, but it is scheduled to be done in 2023, I believe. Is that, or that's what we're budgeting for?
That was our goal, to have the monies ready.
By
Right.
2023.
Yes.
If I recall, we all agreed that that was something that would be worth doing. I mean, the longer we wait, probably the more it's going to cost. If those funds would cover the project. Corinne, do you know if the funds would cover the lining of the tank?
I do believe so, yes.
That would be another one that would, to me, be a no-brainer, but I think that would be up to the entire group. And it just seems to me like we had agreed that that was one of the things we wanted to present to the board. Am I wrong in that?
Based on my review of the minutes, it was mentioned by Corinne, but and Philip, but it wasn't. You know, we didn't have an emotion or like. I don't think that there was any real discussion around it, but I mean, it's a necessary improvement. My feeling is that since it's already been budgeted and scheduled, you know, it may make sense to, you know, take a look at it and say, okay, does the use of ARPA funds make sense here? Or since this is something that we already had planned, should we just continue to go forward with our original intent, and perhaps those funds would be better spent elsewhere on surprise projects, you know, or more long-term planning, you know. But it's up to the town board.
Well, I personally would rather not make that decision without Philip here. He really is a big voice in this group, and but personally, I don't think that projects like that are going to get any cheaper. I could be wrong, but
Nothing is going to get cheaper.
well, let me ask this. I think Philip was pretty clear that he thought this was a good idea. Is this something that Mike and Thomas, you would like to see presented to the board? And Travis, any thoughts on that? Start with Mike and Thomas.
I mean, I kind of feel like it's the same, like I just said. It's necessary and well understood and scheduled. So I don't know if our recommendation from us is necessary. Like, that's already planned. So the only difference would be where the funds are coming from, and that's.
You're talking about finishing the one, or you're talking about getting the 1 million gallon tank. Why? The two,
Yeah,
Relining the 2 million
relining
gallon
the
tank.
2 million.
yeah, upper.
Yes. That's, how to say it. If you're gonna do that, you can't shut the 2 gallon tank down until you have the crossover pipe from the Lamborn plant to get water into the 1 gallon tank, or the 1 million tank. And say, yea, verily, they all need to be done. But we also need to get water that we want to drink.
I think this is I agree with the scheduling, and that is, I know that when we've talked about this in-house and talked about the priorities and the project lists, we tend to come back to, correct me if I'm wrong, Travis, but one, the valve vault, which we would like to get done this year, and if there is the opportunity to divert funds and do the tank liner sooner than later, that would be a priority, because we can't have a situation where the 2 million tank fails and we can't use it because of the lining. And the way that it's been lined out in the budget was a certain dollar amount is being placed in reserve that could potentially be used for a grant. And so if there was an opportunity with grant funds that presented themselves unexpectedly, which is exactly what happened with the ARPA funds, to do that now and then start using that reserve that's already been budgeted, keep that reserve and be using that reserve toward the other projects as that timeline works itself out, that would be the direction that would be our recommendation.
Makes sense to me.
So what would be a path forward to get a schedule, I mean, this is not my area of expertise by any means.
Me personally, I'd be very hesitant to try to reline that tank this year. Well, yeah, in 2022, I can see that happen. There's just 2021. I would not try to do it myself. The timing I would do it is early spring when high flows come up. I mean, because there's several state paperwork that has to go through too that we have to get approved too, because once we take that tank offline, we're going to go into direct filtration. So that's going to be a permanent basis to where it'd be like a 3-month window that will be running different additives. I mean, our chlorine levels are going to be a lot higher because we're not going to have any contact time. I mean, we just can't take it offline and redo the tank because we're going to be going into direct filtration. I mean, even if we brought a smaller tank in, they're still going to want to do different calculations for contact time.
So bottom line is we need to connect the 2 tanks? Is that fair?
Yes, one of them is having the ability to connect the 2 tanks. And a lot of it's because the German Creek springs run a lot higher flows than the other side springs and stuff. I mean, we can run the 1 million and help feed the system, but it's not. I've seen it a lot of times where we've fed the 1 million through the 2 million.
So the lower plant is operational at this point?
I'm disinfecting the tank right at the moment.
Okay.
PRV parts did come in and it has been repaired.
Okay, so line of the tank no sooner than 2022. And if in 2023 the reserves aren't there, we would probably still at that point have some money left over from this grant to cover the balance? Okay, because that's not something you can put off, correct? I mean, that's got to be done.
Yeah, 2023 is the latest. I mean, 2023.
Regarding scheduling, do you guys operate any scheduling techniques for large projects like this? Is it Gantt charts or any kind of like outlines? What techniques do you guys use for time management for large projects like this? Do you just kind of like, do you develop Gantt charts or any kind of large project outlines for scheduling?
Board meeting. There are a lot of moving pieces, and this is not an easy process, especially for someone like me who's never been through a process like this. It's challenging. You look like you want to say something, Mike. Okay. Also, I believe at the request of Philip, he wanted some and I think we all want just to know that there's work being done on SOPs as far as like if the plant shuts down, or you know, those SOPs where an emergency happens and you're out of town. I know we talked about this at the Public Works meeting too, but can you tell us where you are with SOPs? Maybe even particularly related to the after action report, because I think they also suggested some SOPs.
The SOPs that I've always used were the manuals supplied by the manufacturer of each filtration plant.
So again, I'm a little confused. We're talking about like what happened in 2019. The tank is draining really fast. You're out of town. The water, the production is not keeping up with the draining of the tank, and it's draining fast. How would somebody know what to do? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm just saying.
I do not have SOPs for our standard procedure for like emergency response plans and stuff like that are helped out through the county, but standard operating procedures, if there's a water leak, I got the call. I called people out and they started walking lines and trying to look for leaks and stuff, but I do not have it written down.
And again, it would be nice to have Philip here because he's the one who has this. SOPs and emergency plans are different animals. And I think, again, we should wait until he's here to discuss that.
And I think looking at the after action report, there's, the town does participate in and has an agreement with Delta County, and we are part of we do subscribe to the Delta County Emergency Management Plan. But I know out of that after action report, there was some direction in the appendix about beefing up specific to the town, how the town would handle, what the emergency management plan would be in that kind of situation, again, putting it in writing. Basically, taking the steps that we did and memorializing it in some fashion, and including that along as a supplement to the countywide emergency management plan.
Any other thoughts on SOPs before we move on to the SCADA plan? And again, Philip did talk about a SCADA master plan. It would be a way to provide real-time data. It says it will integrate data and control functions and prioritize and upgrade pathway. He talks about Chris Lancey of Brown Hills, as he puts it, has already done some work on the clock tower, and he would be willing to come and talk at the next meeting. And this would look like he would look at pressure monitoring zones in the town that have been a problem, and other items that are real-time data for raw water inputs, spills, daily consumption, lost water calculations, etc. The planning should not be terribly expensive. Implementation of sensors and monitoring equipment will require some loan or grant assistance. And he says he will coordinate at the next meeting. So I had this on the agenda before we knew he wasn't going to be at the meeting. So anybody want to comment on that, or any thoughts about the SCADA plan? And how is the SCADA system working for the 1 million? Do you not know until it's up and operating, or is it working?
No, it's working. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's already been implemented that I've already started for real-time pressure zone checks and stuff. That's like my eye hydrants that I recently installed. There's several things that I've already gone forward in doing that.
Okay, and I realize that in my haste to get moving on this meeting, we did not approve the draft minutes. We did receive some corrections from Administrator Ferguson. I would entertain a motion to approve those with the corrections submitted by Ms. Ferguson.
So moved. Second.
Further discussion?
Just one, I actually spelled Chris's last name incorrectly too in my response. So, Thomas, for your minutes, it's Lantzy. It's Lancey, not Lansky.
You're right.
Thank you.
There's no way for me to know that.
Okay. And could we have a vote on that motion?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Unless anybody has anything further, I just, I do hope that at some point we can hit a good stride and start actually getting things done. And did you say second? No.
I didn't, but I will. Second.
You know, I think we're all working really hard, and we knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it has been a lot rougher than I thought, and I am giving it my all, and it's still really hard. So I just want to say, mainly, I appreciate everybody's patience and everybody's efforts, and certainly your expertise, and I have faith that we are going to be moving along before too long. Any further comments? Okay, this meeting's adjourned at 6:28. Thank you, everybody.